Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting the presentation in about 8 minutes. We're just going to give time for people to get on board. Also, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the School Council's opportunity for progress and enrichment presentation. Tonight's presentation is on School Council year-end planning and succession. And I'll be presenting with Nancy Sands, and I'm Ricardo Francis. Okay, so let's go to the land acknowledgement. The land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Okay, so tonight we are going to be speaking about the end of year. And what we're going to speak about at the end of year in terms of our accountability, what we should do, and our goals and the accomplishments that we've done throughout the year, and creating succession plans for the next year, and also what our hopes and dreams are. I'm just going to introduce myself, Ricardo Francis. I'm part of the Parent Caregiver Community Engagement Office. And Nancy, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Angevine Sands. I'm a parent and caregiver engagement consultant with Equal Step. So I like to start, as you know, if you've been at these before, with Regulation 612, which dictates everything that gives us a basis for how school councils should work. And it states that the term of a school council member goes from the date that they have been elected or appointed and the date of the first meeting of the school council until the first meeting of the school council after elections in the next school year. So your term doesn't end in June. It ends with the first school council meeting and election in September. So what we want you to remember throughout this presentation is that council, because of this, may not plan for the following year. Next. However, they should plan for a smooth transition. And we're going to begin by looking about what you can do with your council this year to make sure the transition into next year's group is smooth. So the chair is required to write an annual report. You would write that report, submit it to the board, or submit it to your principal, who will then give it to the board. You want to list the council meetings that you had and the dates that they were held on, any activities or events that the school council had, and any relevant decisions that advance the work about council. That doesn't mean you have to list every single motion that was passed at your meetings, but the relevant things, the decisions you made that advanced your work. The treasurer is required to complete the PSAB, the Public Sector Accounting Board. That's their annual report. And that report would list all of the incomes that the council had and all of the expenditures. Next. It's a good idea to have you can do a survey. I would prefer like a structured discussion amongst your council and any attendees about feedback about what went well with the council this year and what needs to be improved. And we're going to look at this a little more in depth as we go along this evening. Next. So as part of your transition, it's a good idea. This is separate from the annual report that you submit to the board. It's a good idea to create a report for next year's school council. So they aren't starting from scratch. I know many of you may be on the council again next year, but there will be new people coming in. And it's a good idea to let them know what activities and events did you hold as a council, what committees did you have, both standing, those are the ones that are listed in your bylaws, and ad hoc. Those are the committees that you just created because this year you needed a committee to do something. You might want to add some suggestions that you have for overcoming any hurdles. What hurdles might that be? Getting parents to come out to events. What did you do to do that? And you know, we hit hurdles in everything we do. So any suggestions you would have for the next council? Any ongoing budgets? The TDSB allows, the finance department allows councils to carry funds over for 2 years if you have an ongoing project. So if there's any projects that are going to run this year and next year and the money is set aside for that, you want to let them know that in your report. And it's always a good idea to include a copy of your council's bylaws. Next. Financially, we have spoken about the money that you get. You get that $1.25 for per student, minimum of $300, maximum of $1,000, and $500 from the ministry. Both of those come in on the principal's budget line, the general ledger line 41,500. So you want to ensure that you've used all of those funds. If you haven't used them yet, try to find something if you can to use them up. They will disappear at the end of June. And also make sure that your principal has all the relevant banking access for the funds that the bank account that you have for the funds that you fundraised. Make sure the principal has all of the banking access that he needs to have to transfer it to the chair and the treasurer next year. Next. So now we're going to talk about the transition and reviews. So how do we review our goals and accomplishments? Well, the first question to ask yourselves, and not just you as a chair, but to ask your council, perhaps at the last meeting, is, was this a successful year? What were our council objectives? Had you created clear objectives and goals at the start of the year? What were they? And did you meet them? And if you didn't meet them, that's okay. But if you didn't meet them, why not? What got in the way? How did you work to support the parents and caregivers in your community, as well as the students and the teachers? And what wasn't successful, and how could it be improved? I'm going to repeat myself this evening, I know, because I think this is the most important question to ask ourselves. Too often as councils, we get a big project or an event and we do it. And we go, whew, okay, that's done. Let's move on to the next one. And we never stop and sit down and look at what worked and what didn't work. Most importantly, what didn't work. And how could we ensure, if we wanted to do it again, how could we ensure that it would work? Because just because it didn't work doesn't mean it wasn't a good idea. It just means that some hurdle got in the way that you couldn't get over, and what do you need to do to get over it the next time? Next.
I'm just going to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll be answering them at the end of the presentation. Okay, I'm up. So a lot of times we're speaking about what challenges and obstacles we face, and as Nancy spoke to, it's about that balance sometimes when it's managing our duties and our personal lives and professional responsibility and that of school council, and it's a big juggle. The other thing is, when we speak a lot of times when we have um, low engagement, limited participation at meetings and at events. And we wanted to kind of take this opportunity to reflect on that. How can we do things differently to get people involved? And then one of the other things is really, did we really communicate effectively? And some people will say lack of transparency. And sometimes the methods we go about trying to communicate with others and the barriers we're facing in doing that. And the big thing is just managing those conflicting views. You know, there's school councils, people come with a lot of diverse perspectives and priorities to the council, and it's just a matter of just trying to manage those. And then the final is just equity in decision making, and that means there's some really powerful voices in school council, but it's also to allow all voices to be heard and give those individuals the opportunity to be heard. Okay. Um, as Nancy spoke to earlier, it's about those hurdles. Um, and some of those hurdles could be just logistical, like when we are trying to plan events and where we're going to plan them, how we're going to plan them, and then did we give enough time to um, to provide that opportunity for the vendor or the place that we're having the event. So these are all things that you could look at. And then one of the big things is when we're thinking about school councils, and we have a lot of genuine ideas coming forward, but one of the things is the hesitation for individuals to change. School council has to be flexible. We are always adapting at the TDSB. Things are always changing, and it's really good if individuals can really embrace new ideas. And when we talk about the bylaws and policy gaps, I really, really encourage people to really get a firm understanding of the bylaws and relevant school board policies, which is available on our school on the TDSB School Council website. Please take a look at those, because that could also help you in terms of things like what I'm going to speak to late now is unresolved conflicts, is difficulty managing disagreements, and sometimes these disagreements are just that people haven't had the feel that they're unheard, or there's things that have occurred with the school council that they feel are unresolved. So it's really taking that time to really look into these things and not brush things aside or bury them. And the other thing is poor agenda and time management. Um, I'm guilty of this. You put a lot of things on the agenda in the hope that you'll get through all these things, and then you're finding you're not getting through all these things, so you're speeding up the process, and then people are sitting there going, "Well, I wanted to speak to this. I wanted to speak to that," and you're trying to push at the chair to push things forward, and some people feel overlooked as a result. Okay. So what can we do to eliminate some of those barriers? Well, one of the things that we all know is that there's multiple languages. People speak multiple languages at the TDSB, so we can provide interpretation services at meetings, which is free, and then we can also um, translate meeting notes into multiple languages. I'm just going to say, in terms of the translation services, their costs, but their IA, IA, AI is getting better in terms of those interpretations. And the other thing is to be flexible in terms of those meetings. You can offer them in the school council meetings. You can offer them in the evenings or at daytime, first thing in the morning. Um, and for those in-person meetings, You can provide child minding. Now, there's other opportunities for communication, like in the beginning of the year, hosting a meet the council night. But other thing is partnering with the local library or your parent community engagement worker, if you're a model school, for a family literacy night. The other thing I find a lot of agencies, school councils are using WhatsApp. I encourage the use of WhatsApp, but I also encourage appropriate communications on that WhatsApp. And then showing individuals why this school council actually matters. And that could be part of the meet the council night. And just sharing parent stories about attending school council and how it helped them feel, highlighting projects that improve student well-being, and 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 thanking parent input. The other is featuring student testimonials and newsletters. Like some of the things that school council does impact students, so it would be nice for the students to really provide feedback on that in your newsletters. And this it doesn't have to be your newsletter; it could just be in the school newsletter that you could put in. And the other thing is ways to really support the goals of families. But and really, and it's having that understanding. So you could create a survey, as Nancy had spoke to earlier, to get that feedback, or you could do short polls. And the other thing is really to encourage volunteerism at the beginning of the year. And I'm going to state this. I've stated this in other presentations. When you're asking someone to volunteer, please ensure that you tell them what you're asking them to do. Because a lot of times you say, "Oh, can you volunteer?" They don't really understand what the expectation is. But if you say to them, "Hey, listen, I'd like you to volunteer for pizza lunch for an hour and a half, or if you can come in for this event, and we need you to man a booth for 2 hours." That way, people clearly understand what it's about. And it's funny because um, I was reading some research around this, and one of the things that I never really think about is you bring a friend to school council when you're going to these meetings. Bring others with you, so they further have an understanding, and they may be the next treasurer, school council chair, and the following years, or just a school council member. Well, okay, it's giving me a little bit of a hard time with those clicks here. Um, So one of the things when we look here, we talk about the workshops and information center sessions, the projects supported by school council. What we're really doing is opening more doors for families, to parents and caregivers to connect, and they can contribute and feel heard. Um, and have if we have more flexible options for them, occasions for people to interact and have fun, welcoming events. Every action, big or small, helps build a stronger, more inclusive school community. Fundraising is an opportunity, but it's not the be all and end all. Thank you. Next. Just having a little problem with my mouse. Go. Nancy?
So some sample questions that you could ask yourself in a review is, first one, what could help the next council? And here are some suggestions. Could we get them all? Just keep clicking. So what could help the next council? Thinking back to what you had this year, would it help if your council had some training? Or do you need some more resources, either from the PCCEO or from your principal or from the ministry? Do you need to have to implement some different methods to communicate with each other and with your community? Do you need to provide some avenues for feedback? I think we said probably in the very first of these workshops, it's not enough. Communication isn't about sending stuff out. It's about sending stuff out and getting stuff back. That's a dialogue. Otherwise, you're just having a monologue. If you're just sending stuff out to your parents and there's no way for them to give you feedback, then you're not dialoguing with your community. So would that help if you had better feedback from your community? And would it help if a council set very clear objectives and goals at the beginning of the year, and then picked just a couple goals? If you're a council that's growing, just pick 2 goals for the year, and how are you going to meet those goals? You might various different things you could do to get to that goal. Next. Now, I will admit that this sheet of paper probably should have been at one of our earlier training sessions, but I'm going to show it to you now because it really links in with what we've been talking about this evening. This is called a logic model. You can call it a planning sheet. And I think it's really helpful to put down on paper how you're going to do an event or an activity. So the first thing is, what's the initiative? What's the project initiative? What are you going to call yourself? And what impact do you expect it will happen? So let's say that you're going to, one of your goals is to improve a parent-caregiver understanding of how they can support literacy. So the expected impact would be a better understanding of parent caregivers to support literacy at home. So what resources or input would you need for that? Well, you might need to talk to the teachers and see, could you get one of them to come and help you, or what sort of things would they suggest? You might need some books. You might need some paper and pens. You have to think about what you're going to do and what do you need to do it. Then the activities. What are you going to do? Are you going to have a presentation by the teacher and then break off into groups and do the activities together as parents in the group so they know what to go home with? What outcomes do you expect to happen? Do you expect them to do you expect to have a good turnout at the meeting? Do you expect the parents to participate fully? Do you expect them to go home feeling more confident in being able to support their kids' reading at home? And then finally at the bottom, how are you going to measure the effort of what you do, what you did? How will you measure the effort of what you did? Did you have all of the things that you needed? Did you have enough childminders for the kids? Did you have food for them? That would have gone up in the resources and inputs. And then finally, how are you going to measure the effect? What changed? This you can't answer right away. This would have to be answered after a bit of reflection. So if we stick with my suggestion or my idea about the literacy night, is in speaking to the teachers of the parents that were there over the next month or two, did they notice any change in their students' reading? Did they notice any change in what the kids were bringing home or what they were hearing from parents? So you don't have to use a form like this. The idea, though, is to have something to plan ahead, to actually plan how you're going to do it and what you're going to need and what your expectations are and were they met. Next.
I just want to speak to one other thing in terms of those expectations and trying to figure out the impact of things. You could have a quick opening survey that would say something like, if it's the example that Nancy gave of a literacy night, like what do you know about certain things about literacy, and then at the end you send out another survey seeing where parents are now at as a result of the learning. Okay, so this is very quick. We're going to go over this. This is about the School Council and Innovation Grant. I congratulate all those that had the opportunity to utilize this. The goods receipt is, it needs to be received by May 16th. And all unspent funds must be returned by June 13th. And the final report is due on June 20th.
Okay, so we have been speaking up until now about how to wrap up your year, what reports you have to do, what things you should be thinking about to end the year. We're now going to talk a little bit about succession plans, thinking ahead for next year, for next year's school council, and getting ready for them to come in. It's really important that we think as a council at the end of the year, we look around the table and we see who's here. Who's here? Who are we hearing from? Usually the people who are sitting at the table or are sitting in the audience, the same ones that come every single meeting, are the ones that are already engaged. Parents who show up maybe once or twice, maybe they're not so much engaged. They can still be very engaged at their home. I don't want to give the impression that if you don't come to a school council meeting, you're not engaged in your kids' education. We know from lots of research that many parents are. But if we want to hear from them, if we want what we do as successful, we have to consider that. So look at who sat in the room with you at your meetings. How were the race, the class, the ethnicity, the language, ability, nationality, and education? How were those streams that are available in your school? How were they represented at your meetings and in the decision making? Next. I'm asking you to consider who was here at the meetings and who was missing, which voices were being heard and which were silent or silenced. And that's really important. I think I had a slide at the last one of these that said that just because you were invited doesn't mean you were made welcome. And what needs to change so that we can hear from the people who are at the margins so that we can start to bring them in. Next.
I just want to speak to one other thing in terms of the idea of this participation. I'm kind of losing my thought here, but it's just the whole idea of how you go about inviting people to school council. And one of the other things that I really strongly encourage is really utilizing subcommittees. These are groups that can work on their own on projects that because they're unable to come to school councils, and then they present whatever their findings are or whatever they're doing to the chairs, and then you can discuss it amongst the membership. So these just gives a broader opportunity for participation at school council.
So the Regulation 612 gives the principal the job of organizing and running the election. So what can you do as a council? Remember, as I said at the beginning, your role lasts until the election in September or October. But what can you do as a council to assist the principal? Because we know they are really busy all year and especially in September. The council can form a committee that will run from now until September. Yes, they're going to have to work over the summer a little bit. And they will assist the principal in getting ready for election day. Together with the principal, they can choose the election date. They can create nomination forms. They can talk to parents and caregivers that they see at the park, at the pool, at the store, at faith centers, at community centers throughout the summer to encourage parents and caregivers to become involved in the council in the fall. And then they can plan election day, creating ballots, gathering any candidate information if that's what you decide to do. It's not necessary. Each council can decide for themselves. To make a list of the officer positions that you will vote on after the election of members. Let me take this opportunity to emphasize that the election chooses members. Once those members are elected, then from the members choose who will be their officers. Next. We suggest creating an information sheet for the next school council, so they're ready to get up and running. An information sheet to hand out to people so they know what the school council is and what they would be getting into. So you want to let them know how many parent caregivers you are able to elect each year. That's available in your bylaws. You want to let them know the average numbers of meetings per year. You have to have at least 4. Some schools have a meeting every month. Some schools have a meeting every other month. What does your school council do? Just so people get an idea of what sort of commitment they'd have to make. You want to let them know what the role of the parent and caregiver is, and that is available in the bylaws. You want to know any standing committees that are available. Again, the standing committees are the ones that appear in bylaws and must occur every year. You also might want to just tell them these are some of the successes we've had in the past couple of years. And if you want, include the school council bylaws. As part of your succession package, when you're trying to encourage people to run, and this might not have to be ready till September, you want to have this information so people know what they would be getting into. Next.
Oh, and Nancy, before we move forward, what would be an example of a standing committee?
An example of a standing committee could be the budget committee. It could be maybe you have an outreach committee that communicates and tries to go to the margins, or you might have a volunteer committee. It's something that the school council, when they did the bylaws, determined that this was a committee that had to happen every single year. All right. Another thing to do as you're planning for succession is to organize your meeting notes and your budgets from this past year, so they can look back, the new council can look back at what you did. You can either have hard copies or you can store it on Google Drive to make sure that the passwords are available to start your email accounts. Hopefully you all have email accounts through the TDSB. The new chair can change that password, but you have to get into it. To put all hard copy documents and forms in a place that's accessible for all council members. That might be your PSAB. It might be the annual report that you wrote, your bylaws, again, anything that you have that you think they should know. And to provide some sort of guide for record keeping so they don't have to reinvent the wheel when they start in September. Next.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing about that is that guide also helps. Instead of recreating things each time, all that information is there, that documentation as to how things work, so you're not constantly reinventing the wheel, as Nancy would have pointed out. Okay. Well, this is a very simple one. A lot of times we go throughout the year doing things, and when we talking about I'm saying celebrate the achievements, but when we think about celebrating the achievements that we do, whether it's presentations, letters, or events, or just recognizing the contribution of our volunteers. But one of the things is this should happen year round. Whether a thing is successful or not, you celebrate the fact that you've accomplished something. Not everything is going to be absolutely successful, and when they are, great. But really take that opportunity to acknowledge yourself as an individual, and acknowledge the members and your volunteers. This is yours, Nancy.
All right. You know what? I think we said it before when we were talking about volunteers, is host a thank you, or in person or virtual virtual gathering, or send out a note of thank you to your council members, to your committee, any subcommittee members, to volunteers. to avoid doing all of this work at the end of the year, every time you have an event and you've had volunteers, don't forget to thank them, either in person or writing an email or sending them a note. It's just making a point of patting yourselves on the back and patting the other people that helped you on the back. And then finally, don't forget to broadly advertise that you'll be seeking new members in the fall. When we celebrate what we've done, we encourage people to be part of that activity the next year. I'm sure I've said before that we know from research that when something is meaningful and relevant to a parent or caregiver, they will engage. And if you have done things that have been meaningful and relevant to parents and caregivers in your school, and you advertise those successes, then the involvement, the engagement will go up the next year.
Again, this is just a reminder, give thanks. Oh, we're at the end. So this is what you could do. I spoke earlier about forms and policies and information on school council. Please use the QR code. You can also see here that there is the URL link, but to make it all very easy for you, all you have to do is go on Google and type in TDSB School Council, and that information will come up for you. This is our information that you can either reach us by email and myself by phone. Please, Ricardo Francis at tdsb.on.ca or with equalstep@gmail.com. And then right now, Nancy and I and the PCCEO office would like to thank you for your dedication to student success and your school council. Your work and sacrifices